Don't even try that. This stupid writer trying to make it out like Shadow is trying to help them. At least it feels like with how this episode ended, it at least made it almost feel as if Shadow understands that he's a jerk. And that's, I guess, the good silver lining of the whole situation. It's not as if it's the typical Eminence and Shadow thing where Sid, in the end, is trying to make it out as if he's seen something that he wanted to do, and everybody else seen something big. It ends up being that in the end, but at least it shows that Shadow understands that, yeah, I wronged them. Yeah, I need to get out of here for a little bit. Yeah, I'll come back later. It still comes into the whole situation of miscommunications between the characters themselves, which is honestly the most fascinating thing that I have with the series as a whole, and which obviously bugs the hell out of anybody that, you know, really, really loves the series and loves everything about it and loves the comedy that creates. I like that aspect of the misunderstandings between the two sides. And yes, I will admit when it frustrates me a lot. And this whole arc has been really hard for me, honestly, to really stomach. Because it is one of those cases where you take that chemistry, you take that gimmick of Shadow doing his own thing and Shadow Garden doing their own thing, and each side has their own goal. Yes, Shadow Garden technically is for everything is for Shadow. But what makes it so difficult is that in this case, this is the one rare case of, I think, the whole thing where it really does put Shadow Garden in a position where they feel Shadow is working against them, has turned against them, has abandoned them, has, that they assumed, killed one of their own people. Granted, they didn't really think that he killed them. It's just that they thought that John Smith killed Delta, and for a brief moment thought that John Smith was somebody else. But still, it is hurting them. Shadow Garden is hurt. They think that he has abandoned them. And honestly, from Alpha's perspective, it's mostly in that idea of he believes that we failed. He believes that we are useless. He has abandoned us. We're obviously not strong enough. We're not smart enough. We're not smart like him. And thus, he discarded us. That's the harsh reality that kind of comes from this whole thing. And yes, it technically is played up as a joke, but at the same time, it doesn't work as a joke for me. It's kind of like the whole Rent-A-Girlfriend situation, where I've given up on that show as being a comedy, and it's become, in my headcanon, just cruel. It just has become to the point where it's just filthy cruel. Whereas, yes, a lot of other people are going to find it funny still. But anyways, I'm not equating this to Rent-A-Girlfriend. That is a show that I don't like, and Eminence and Shadow has a lot of things that I do like. But yeah, let's get into the episode proper. Multiple perspectives here, obviously. Mostly with the Shadow Garden situation, yes, we have Alpha believes that Shadow has left us. We failed. We didn't see what we're supposed to see, and thus he ditched us. But then quickly we get the reveal that we all kind of assumed was going to happen. I said this in the last episode impressions. I knew it was going to come. Yes, somebody comes in with evidence that, yes, Gatan was apparently preparing to do the same exact thing that Shadow's doing. And so they go, it all makes sense. Shadow foreseen this, and thus he was protecting us. He did all of this in order to protect us. Again, that usual fix the situation. They love him so much that they're going to see that everything he does is for their sake. Which, in a sense, it is, but it's not. The whole situation was that Shadow seen that they were overreaching too much. They were becoming too big, and they were going to eventually blow up. And yeah, technically, this was a way of kind of resetting things. Now, in the end, it didn't turn into them actually resetting things. And I guess that's to credit of what I was kind of hoping for in the last episode. For those that missed my last episode impressions, one of the hopes that I had was that it wouldn't turn into a thing where Sid destroys Mitsugoshi, destroys everything, and then in the end, they just go, oh, yay, it was all because he was protecting us, and Shadow seen something that we didn't see, so, you know, Sugoi. It sort of is that, but at the same time, at least there's a hint here that Shadow Garden themselves kept things going. Now, it wasn't just they themselves, it was just more of an aspect of utilizing what they misunderstood that he was going to do and keeping things afloat. They got all the money in order to keep Mitsugoshi alive, so in a sense, Shadow Garden still wins. In the end, they still keep Mitsugoshi going. They still keep this thing that, yes, they technically built for the sake of Shadow. So did they learn anything in the end? It looks as if they're still using bills. So what exactly did Shadow do to teach them a lesson? This is where there's a little bit of a what was the point moment. Yes, the whole point in the end from Shadow Garden's perspective is that Shadow's seen something coming. Shadow's seen that the Cult of Diablos was going to do this, and thus he put all this into effect to essentially destroy this company, destroy Giton, and for us to still survive because he gave us all the money to prove to people that our bills are still worth it. But it doesn't imply the idea that anything that Shadow's seen over here, that they assume that he's seen, made any difference. The whole point was that they were getting too big. They were selling way too much merchandise. They were becoming too big as a corporation. They were overshadowing all the local companies. They were getting a lot of heat for that. People don't like them. They're killing the small business. They're creating this credit system. They're creating the bill system. And it's getting to a point where he wanted to shut it down because it was getting too big and it was going to fall apart eventually. But Mitsugoshi's still there. The bills are still there. They just essentially proved to the people that their bills are accounted for. Like they said, hey, here's the money. Your money's still good. Which I don't necessarily see making people go, oh, shrug, never mind. You are good. That was one of those things, like they built up this whole thing where everybody's freaking out. They're wanting their bills back, but then Mitsugoshi just shows a bunch of money and everybody's like, oh, okay, so my money is fine. Give me more bills. No. No, it doesn't work like that. That's not going to make people just shrug and move on. They're going to want their money back. It all kind of feels fishy in the end because, again, nothing really feels like anything changed. And it felt like, in the end, it just turns into Sid wanting to print money and so that he could use a counterfeit bill because he's always wanted to do that. And it just so happens that the Cult Diablos was going to do the same thing, and it all kind of falls apart. Yukime, in the end, becomes the actual smart mastermind in the end that is actually orchestrating things that ultimately affect Shadow Garden, and Sid walks away. Now, there is a funny aspect here in the idea that, what is the letter? The letter, I think, is the biggest massive question mark in this entire episode. Because yes, Sid gave Beta a letter, and he said, decipher this. And she takes it, and they decipher it through Etta, and they figure out from that letter all this stuff. Now, it could be the idea that Sid just gave it to Beta on a whim, like, hey, here, have this. Yeah, sure, there's a code on it. Ha ha ha. But in actuality, on that letter was his scribblings that he didn't realize it, but actually told them where the money was and everything. And through Eta and Beta, they figured out where the money was. Because obviously, in the end, the letter wasn't supposed to tell them, go get the money. It's another one of those misunderstandings things that they took it and they ran with it, and it wasn't what Sid intended. But through his scribblings, it does lay out the fact that, yes, this whole thing, and he was taking down this group, and yeah, the money's over here, go get the money, and use it to help Mitsugoshi. But as we see from the end of the episode, that wasn't his intention. He wanted that money. He wanted the money. It's still, in the end, one of those aspects of the writer trying to make Shadow Garden continue to believe that Shadow is trying to help them. But in the end, no. Shadow had no intentions for them to have that money. He had no intention to save them. Because in the end, as he's walking away, he's like, crap, yeah, I need to leave for a little bit because they're probably really pissed at me. It's just frustrating that in the end, after what I think is probably one of Shadow's most nastiest arcs when it involves Shadow Garden, the most heartless and kind of dick moves he's ever done, a move that honestly should actually make these girls stop hanging out with him. Like, they should at least acknowledge that Sid is not a good person. The end message is still, oh, Shadow always loves us, and he was always trying to protect us. He just seen something that we didn't see. No, you're seeing something that's not there. That's always the punchline, is they see something that's not there. Because yes, on Sid's side of everything, he goes through with his plan. Eventually, Yukime ends up running into Geton. Shadow is going to go get all of his spoils. He's even thinking about, how am I going to move all this money? There's so much money here. I have all these corporations' money. How am I going to move all this stuff? And it's all gone. And he gets mad because he thinks Geton stole it. Which we find out later on that no, it was Shadow Garden because they read something into the letter he made that he didn't intend for them, which is a location of that money. They come over, which I guess is the one positive in this whole situation, is at least there's something where Shadow Garden one-upped Shadow. Because that was one of my hopes that I had in the previous episode, was I hope that in the end, Shadow Garden beats him. And they technically beat him, but it's under the guise that they thought that's what he wanted him to do, to take the money. So I do admit there's something in there that I kind of find extremely ironic, extremely comedic. But yeah, he thinks Geton did it, goes out there, beats the crap out of the guy as he's beating Yukime, pummeling him. Again, the same joke they use pretty much in every fight where he says, you took something precious of mine. Everybody thinks that they're talking about love and them, which they pretty much did the same thing, I think, in Elizabeth's fight. They did the same thing in the previous This is an ongoing joke, is that he yells constantly about the enemy doing something, and the girls think that they're fighting for him. This writer likes using the same joke a lot. Now, Geton's perspective in this whole thing is that, yes, it seems like the Cult of Diablos did pretty much mess with him. They're blaming Cult Diablos for him essentially going crazy. It seems like the Cult Diablo probably offered him power to protect his people, because that's been the whole thing of these tribes fighting each other, these groups taking from each other, and he didn't want things taken from him. So he used the Cult Diablos, and the Cult Diablos ran him through the ringer. They corrupted his mind so much through either the pills or whatever. In the end, his story becomes he wanted to protect his family, and insert Cult Diablos conclusion. That's his story. And I was hoping there would be something more there, but unfortunately there's not. It just gives a little bit of a nice little twist there in the idea that, yes, he wanted to protect Yukime in the end, but corruption turned bad, kills everybody. And in the end, yes, acknowledges that Yukime was his precious thing. Now, again, Yukime believes the entire time Shadow is fighting for her, that she is his precious thing that he's trying to take. Sid just wants his money back. He's pummeling the hell out of him and ultimately kills him for his money, which is supposed to be funny despite the fact that he's killing somebody. It is kind of twisted how this show just doesn't care about how he's cutting people in half and murdering people endlessly because it's funny. But no, the weird thing that happens here is as Sid is pummeling him to death in front of his wife, and we're supposed to laugh because he's repeating the same line over and over again, Geton eventually says, "You can have my precious, it's over there." I think what he said here, I think this is a break in translations for at least High Dive. I believe right here he says, "There's something beneath Yukime." And obviously Shadow sees that as, oh, there's something under the snow. Yuki, snow. They didn't really translate that at all. It just seemed like they didn't even try. But I think that's essentially what was said there. Because yes, Sid pretty much says, he said something's beneath the snow. That's why he starts to dig later on. But no, it's something under Yukime. Which is, I'm hoping they'll kind of clarify that later. My assumption is that Geton is saying that there's something within Yukime. That Yukime has this crazy power. He said that at the very beginning when they first started fighting. You had all this power, but you didn't use it to protect anything. Now you're going to use it to take what was the remaining of what I have. It's putting salt on wounds. But Sid beats him, and then Yukime thinks that, yes, again, that Sid did it all for her. She gets all doki doki. And then later on, Sid comes back there and starts digging in the snow. Again, finding this thing that's beneath Yukime. Yuki, snow. But then they end up still finding something. Delta still finds something in the end. So that's the question mark there. Is it that it's just a happenstance that Delta found something? Is it Geton wasn't talking about something being deep within Yukime? Or was he literally saying that there was something underneath Yukime's feet that is important? I don't think that's the case because he never took anything to begin with. I think he's talking about something within Yukime, which makes sense because Yukime is going to join Shadow Garden and maybe later on they'll find this super crazy hidden power that's within her. But what did Delta find? It looked like something like white with green streaks on it. I don't recall if that's in reference to anything in the series. But yeah, Yukime eventually will run into Shadow Garden. Alpha, she reveals everything and says that he did it all for us because Sasuga, Sid's amazing. Come join our group. You'll be the underbelly of Mitsugoshi, yada, yada, yada. Shake hands, shakes, move on. Now, the big interesting thing is the very end. I don't know if I'm reading way too much into this or if it's just a lost in translation or what, but we have this whole scene where Sid is with Delta, and they're trying to dig up the snow to try to find the treasure. And again, Shadow Garden has it. He just thinks it's under the snow. He thinks that's where he put it. My precious to Geton was Yukime. So him saying something with the beneath or within Yukime is a power or something, not under the snow. But as they're digging, they bring up that thing again where Delta's saying, you know, hey, you promised me you're going to do anything I ask of you. And he's like, no, I can't give you anything. But what I found was interesting in this scene was that he starts to give an analogy of Santa Claus. I'm not Santa Claus. Well, who's Santa Claus? Well, Santa Claus is this guy that walks around with his clothes stained in blood. It's red, and he never gives me what I want. He never delivers on my dreams. His dreams, obviously, in his previous life was to be the Eminence Shadow. So every year, he always asked Santa Claus to be the Eminence Shadow. He believed it to be true. He believed Santa Claus was real, and that Santa Claus would make him into the Eminence Shadow. Now, he's saying this to tell Delta, I'm not like Santa Claus where I can't give you everything you want. But it doesn't make any sense. And this is one of those rare moments where I think Delta is smarter than Sid because he's saying, I can't give you everything. I can't give you whatever you want. I'm not Santa Claus. So the assumption there is that Santa Claus normally gives you anything you want. But then he starts to talk more about Santa Claus and eventually starts to say that Santa Claus doesn't give you what you want, didn't give me what I wanted. He betrayed me every single year, didn't give me what I wanted. And she picks up on this and says, but you're not Santa Claus because he doesn't give you what you want. He betrays your dreams. Is it almost the writer pointing out that technically Sid doesn't give them what they want in the end? He never gives them what they want in the end. They want Sid. They want Shadow. That's what they've always wanted. What does Delta always want? Let's go out hunting. What does Alpha want? She wants Sid. She wants Sid to recognize her. They all just want Sid. They want Shadow. And he never gives it to them. Again, I might be looking too much into it, but it kind of gives that feeling of like he's pointing out something. I can't be this, and this doesn't give you anything. And she's kind of going, that doesn't sound like it makes much sense because you just pointed out something that never gives you anything. And they have that moment of like, oh, I think we're on a different page. Like we're not on the same page here. The reality is it's probably just a joke around the idea of him trying to make an example, that example being stupid and broken. And he has to explain the example because she has no indication about what Santa Claus is. And in the end, Delta's smart enough to see that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense, Sid. But yes, Sid ultimately just walks away from Delta, just kind of ignores that she's there digging for him, walks away, and she ends up finding something. So whatever he might have been trying to look for, or at least some discovery that he'd probably be excited for, he misses because he's Shadow and doesn't give squat about Shadow Garden, and will leave Delta to dig endlessly for him because he ordered her to, and doesn't care about the results. I don't know. He just walks away because Shadow seemingly hates Shadow Garden and doesn't want to have any mind to them. But again, this kind of solidifies that mentality that he realizes that, yeah, I kind of wronged them. I'll probably disappear for a bit, come back later, act as if nothing happened, because that's my secret technique for not losing these types of relationships, by just returning as if nothing happened, because I'm Shadow and I'm a dick. This entire arc, if you've not guessed it by now, this entire arc has made me not like Shadow. Before, I just didn't care for him. I never really found his humor to be that funny to me. So my enjoyment's been mostly around Shadow Garden. This arc just makes me hate him because not only is he doing his usual, carefree self of doing whatever he wants to do, and then everybody's kind of following him. This is one of the rare cases where it feels like it is being malicious to them at the same time. When they're doing everything for him, and he seemingly doesn't realize they're doing everything for him, he's doing actively things against them, wasting their time, destroying what they built for him, that they've spent their whole life building. And in the end, like, the closing credits is literally another example of that. Delta, help me dig stuff, I'll give you something. And then literally just walk away. Literally walk away while she's doing that, and in a sense not give her what she wanted. He's a dick. But yeah, that's hopefully the end of this arc. Easily the roughest arc for me. Not only just for the fact that I hated Shadow in this entire arc and what he was doing to Shadow Garden, but at the same time, it wasn't very interesting. And I think the deeper storyline, which is Yukime and Geton, just turns into another, because Cult Diablos used him, he killed everybody, and oh, by the way, he actually loved her, sob story, move on. And then Yukime joins the harem, because he completely misunderstands that Shadow thinks she's precious to him. But that is what it is. That is the joke. Hopefully the next arc is better. I am really hoping this next arc picks it back up. We have, again, like 5 episodes to work with, so hopefully it's a really solid arc to conclude this core. Please. But we'll see. But that's my thoughts on episode 7 of Eminence and Shadow. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's thought of the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate it, but it does. And y'all take care.